through them into, and we will get started. Okay. Meet my Gracie. Gracie is an 11-year-old little girl who has Down syndrome and autism. She is the third of my 4 children, and Gracie is actively involved in many community activities like soccer and adaptive dance, horseback riding. She has learned to read really nicely lately too, and she's even playing drums in her school as well as doing chorus. Having Gracie means we have some extra challenges in our family, but we all agree that Gracie being a part of our family has made us all more patient, kind, accepting, and a loving family in general. So our world is really happy with Gracie in it.
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute with the sharing the screen. This is Hunter. He's the oldest of my 3 children, and he has an intellectual disability and autism and epilepsy. But we don't let that define who Hunter is, because disabilities are only part of who he is. He's really funny, he has a great sense of humor, and he's very athletic. As you can see in a lot of the pictures I have up here, he loves different sports. So he does horseback riding. He's really into swimming, Special Olympics gold medalist swimmer. He loves many activities, taking the dog out for a walk and going to dances. He's going to the Night to Shine prom tomorrow. He just likes living like an everyday life like we all do. He loves to travel. He loves to go out to eat. And that's, again, the same as many other people like to do as well. So let's get right into some of these things that, like Mandy said, like we surveyed from families on things they would really like the professionals to know and some of their experiences. And one of the first things to come up is understand my child. Families really want you to get to know their child, him or her, on a personal level. Become more knowledgeable about my child's disabilities, medical issues, behaviors, become familiar with their IEPs and ISPs, health history, and their family life and their interests, again, because they're more than just a disability. Establish those connections. So we know you are invested. Professionals are very privy to all of the personal details of our lives because of these reports and these health records. So it'd be nice if you could share something about your family or yourself to make us feel more of a connection and make it feel less business-like. Become better informed about the child's diagnosis, because when you understand what the diagnosis entails, you may be able to suggest resources, accommodations, and services more effectively. We had one parent tell us, people kept getting confused and referring to characteristics of type 2 diabetes when their child actually had type 1 diabetes. So, it's really important to know the correct diagnosis and learn as much as you can about it as possible, or ask questions about it. Another big area about understanding children that came up quite often was about nonverbal children. And nonverbal children or adults just does not mean non-feeling. Just because an individual can't speak or has trouble communicating or does not communicate in a traditional manner does not mean they don't understand or they don't have feelings. Knowing that behavior is a form of communication and that there's always a reason for the behavior. The individual child or adult is trying to communicate something to you. We've heard from a few families that the child will have a behavior and the person working with them will say, there's no reason for that behavior. Well, we should all know that there's always a reason. It may not always be apparent and may be very difficult to figure out, but there's always a reason. Because you think about, all of us have internal dialogue going on in our heads. We're thinking about things we have to get done later. We don't always say everything we think about somebody. We may not say it out loud. Right. So that's the same things that, individuals with disabilities, there's always a reason, there's something maybe going on and it's not apparent to the individual that's working with them currently. There's many contributing factors too, because, there's, personality conflicts sometimes, you don't always enjoy the company of somebody you're with, or somebody may get on your nerves. That's just the way life is. And that's the same for a person with a disability. There may be underlying anxiety or concerns with health, not feeling good and not being able to verbalize that. So that could be part of the equation. So that nonverbal and that communication factor was a big piece with families and understanding their children. Another area is to consider some of the parental barriers. And there's quite many that may contribute to communication or circumstances with the family that may impact the relationship with a provider or professional. And we're just going to go through a few of these that were mentioned today. So one is considered the family dynamics. There's some families that are single parents. They may have multiple children that they have to take care of, or multiple children with disabilities. And the child might live in two different homes, and there's like family dynamics that may be impacting the relationship and the communication. Levels of support. Who's the primary caregiver of the child, and what support do they have? Some families have a lot of support. They have grandparents and aunts and uncles and family helping out. And then there's other people that are pretty much on an island and don't have much support at all. Time. Is time commitments impacting, the communication or, response times from families because they're working or they have other commitments? Financial impacts, monetary factors often impact families' participation. They can't attend meetings at certain times of day. They can't participate in certain activities at the school. They might have multiple jobs or just lost a job or reduced income. And this impacts their ability to provide for their family in many different levels. Language barriers, we often encounter this here at the ARC as advocates, and the family may need documents in their native language. They may need translation, interpreter, and do they fully understand the process? Because if it's not native to their language or to where they come from, they may have difficulty understanding it, and they may need more explanation in order for them to understand what's being requested. Frustration. This often happens with families because of a past experience. So we ask, we work with families and they've already had maybe difficulties in the past communicating, say, for example, with the IEP team. So they're bringing those frustrations to the next meeting. And sometimes they're frustrated just by, just in general, like how life is so busy, and they had to keep calling the health insurance to try to get the speech therapy covered. And they've been, on the phone all day, and then now they have another issue. Sometimes parents are asked to do like a lot of advocacy to legislators, or they have to write to their health insurance and their government officials to try to get them to support an issue, or deal with something that's being taken away from their child. So they're coming to the table already with other frustrations, and unfortunately sometimes with your meeting that may impact the communication, the participation for them. Lack of confidence. So like we mentioned before, even with the language barrier, but just in any general family, they may not have the confidence to speak up on a situation, and they may look to you as the experts and that what's best, even though they know their child best. You work in the field, you do this on an everyday basis. Also, they might have a different parenting style, a different way to make communicating. Some people are more outspoken and other people are more quiet. We're all different. So it just may be a different style of communicating sometimes as well. And that experience level, new parents, tainted parents, like we mentioned, that all comes to the table when working with professionals. And lastly, transportation was something that came up quite often. They don't have transportation, families, to get to meetings or to get to trainings and events, or they may have other children that they have to take care of and don't want to watch them. So just like, we're saying, don't paint all parents with the same brush, or guardians with the same brush. Like if you had a bad experience with families, or you see people not showing up for IEP meetings, not really caring about their children, we know professionals see that the other side as well. But both sides need to try not to bring the negative experiences and try to start fresh with the current experience. Establish trust. Again, another area where communication is key. In order to build that trust up, we have to set up the parameters up front on communication, because if we keep that communication open between the professional and the family, things will run a lot smoother, and there'll be much more success. So we always go in, even just as advocates from the beginning, we'll say, we want to talk about communication. How are you communicating with the family, with the parents? Does the parent want to see something, for example, like a report? Do they want to get the report quarterly? Do they want to have monthly visits? Do they prefer emails or phone calls or texts? What do we want to include in these communications? And definitely at school, if the child, is a child that has like some significant disabilities and can't communicate about their day, what do we want this communication log to look like? What information is the most important to the family? We want to lay it out all out there and get those communications established ahead of time and move forward. And we could always tweak and adjust it. But again, to keep that trust and that relationship, we have to have that communication. And listen to their concerns. Families want to be heard. They want to come in and know they have enough time. This is not just a 30-minute meeting and they feel rushed and we can't get everything out there that our concerns are, or that people are multitasking, or but where somebody said about one IEP meeting where the person was actually on virtual, but they were talking to someone else or talking on the phone at the same time. So, listen to our concerns and be present in the moment, and be honest with us. It's okay to say this isn't working or we don't feel like we can do that, but let's all go back to the drawing table. And if that honesty is there, nothing's going to be secretive or not given the appropriate information. And then that way we have to try to salvage the relationship. If we start with that honesty up forward and that transparency, then we're already working from a better plate there. They don't want to feel like they're being told something different from what they're hearing from someone else. So, the aide in the classroom is telling them behind everyone else's back what's going on there, and then they confront them, and then this is what's really actually happening. We want to try to avoid that stuff. And if the team says they're going to do something, let's try to stick to our word as much as possible. We understand, families understand, just as things come up for them, things will also come up for the school or the agency, and they may be able not to get to something. So we know if you're going to follow through. If you're not able to follow through in the timeline you said you were, just let the families know. And admit to mistakes. We all make them. So families and individuals really want the providers and the professionals to see the individual as a person, as that individual person. Not just their disability. We often see, and I saw this quote, I can't, and I have to remember who I saw it from, but I was doing the Temple University C2P2 program, and we had a speaker, and he said that this statement, and it really rang true with me, that people with disabilities are often over controlled and under influenced. So you see that a lot. Families have said to us, and I've seen it with my own child, that, over controlled, meaning somebody's with them all day, prompting them what to do, telling them here to go, try this, do that. And then not as influenced to try something out of the normal or do something themselves, or, lead in a direction where they could, find their own skills and their own interests. So that really rang true with me. So I like to share that quote. So when you're working with the individual, avoid using they. When talking about my child is an individual, and we would like you to use their name. Don't refer to the individual by their diagnosis. Don't generalize an entire group by their disability, such as using Down's kids, or ask for the preferred language that the individual would like to be used with their disability. So maybe somebody would like to be called autistic, and someone else may just like to be said that they have autism. So avoid the stereotypes that are out there for people based on their disability. So you'll often hear, for example, people with autism are not social, or they have poor eye contact. That could be for a symptom of the disability, but doesn't mean every child with autism or adult with autism is going to have those concerns, or, we see sometimes we go into an IEP and a student starting school, and they'll already have the IEP and the placement decided just based on their disability. Like, oh, the child has Down syndrome, they're going to go right into our life skills class for the rest of their life here at the school. Another thing we hear often is like people with intellectual disabilities can't make decisions. They need somebody to make decisions for them. That's also another stereotype that is not true. Everyone can make some sort of decision individualized to what their abilities are. And talk to the individual, not about them. So if they're in the class, or you have an appointment with them, speak with the individual. Don't speak about them. I know when I was my son was going to be going to the orthodontist and he had to get braces. I went out and like interviewed different orthodontists, met with them, and then like one really struck me because he didn't even look at Hunter or talk to him or acknowledge him, and just talked right to me and my husband. And I was just like, well, that's a definitely no. Because, even though he might not be able to answer right away or understand exactly what you're saying, he still deserves the respect that you introduce yourself, you say hello, you talk to him. So speak about the individual, speak with the individual, not just about them. They're, even if they can't speak, they are listening. The individual can pick up bits of the conversation. They're should be respected as the individual that they are and what they can bring to the appointment or the meeting. It may differ depending on their ability, but every individual can bring something to the table. So include the individual in decision making when and where appropriate. So ask him or her their opinion, explain things to them as well as you can. Give the individual choices and opportunities and roles. That was another thing that came up a lot. Think outside the box about how to include an individual with disabilities and communicate with them. And give them the time to process information and give them the supports that they require. Be an active listener and acknowledge that what communication that does take place. And then remember, this is another thing, documents reflect an individual while they're under a microscope. So if you're looking, for example, like the behavior plan, and it's kind of tracking what the individual's doing, all day. Imagine if you were someone was observing you all day and writing down your every moment. What would that look like? So for example, like Sarah tapped her pencil on her desk for 10 minutes instead of writing her report. That would look like, that you're wasting time and you're not doing what you're supposed to do, but you're still getting it done, but that's something you're doing in between. Or for example, Joe was pacing while on the phone, his voice got really like heated while he was talking to customer service. So if you see that under a microscope, you're thinking this person's really agitated, they're acting inappropriately, they shouldn't be getting mad, but like, there's different things that happen throughout the day that may be impacting that situation. So just remember the things, we understand that things about our children need to be documented. We need those reports, but they're often overly highlight the negatives, and that these observations, they're highlighting the deficits, the problems, but just don't judge our children by just looking at the report and saying, oh no, this kid is a big problem just based on what's in that report. Other children also aren't, a typical child's not analyzed as closely as often as our children are. So if, say they're having a disruptive minor behavior at the lunch table, well, there's the lunch table over here of other students that are probably having a lot of disruptive behaviors too, but nobody's really watching them. And we move on from there. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mandy to continue on with some other stuff.
So another area parents wanted professionals to know was about presuming competence. And you've probably all heard the saying, if you met one person with insert diagnosis here, you've met one person, because they are all different. We want to make sure that people are treated individually, and assumptions aren't made about people just because of a diagnosis they have. So, the keyword really is one person. Don't let past experiences with other consumers that you've had dictate how future relationships or services need to be rendered to the next person. That's just making assumptions and generalizations with it. So you want to presume competence, that each of your Consumers are unique individuals with their own strengths and their needs, and you want them to truly view them as an individual and let them try. When my daughter started kindergarten, I wrote a little story that I give still to this day, and she's in 4th grade, to every new set of staff that we have, just to let my expectations be known to everybody about what presuming competence is and the importance of it. So this is just a little story I call Let Her Try. To the well-meaning people who work with my child, I have one request this year: let her try. When I open her backpack and see a perfectly colored in picture, a craft that is identical to the teacher's example, or a paper filled in with legible writing, I know it's not my child's work. Let her try. I know that it is easier said than done at times because you just want to help. Maybe you are short on time and she isn't working fast enough. Maybe you don't want her to work to stand out as different next to her classmates. Maybe she's not cooperating that day. Maybe you want her to be able to take beautiful work home just like her classmates do. Maybe it's hard and you feel bad putting demands on her. Maybe you think she just can't. Put all those maybes aside and let her try. I want to see if she scribbled more this week than last week. Is she getting closer to coloring in the lines? Are her squiggles just starting to look more like straight lines and circles? Is she choosing realistic colors for the picture she's making? Can she tell me about the work she made? Did she follow any of the directions? Will there be 5 separate marks on her paper where one day GRACE will be? There is value to me in whatever she has done. Let her try. By coloring over her squiggle, you are showing her that her hard work was not good enough. By completing her papers, you have left her idle during her educational time. By sending her home with a perfect paper, I am missing out on getting progress indicators. By doing it yourself, you are not putting any demands on her and instead reinforcing the fact that people will do things for her. And I am left with vacant spots on my refrigerator where her work should be displayed. Let her try. I want to know that you have high expectations for her too. I want to know that you believe she can. I want you to let her try. Her work does not need to look like any other child's. It should look like her work. The goal is not mastery, but independence. Perfection is not expected or even desired. Grace is perfectly imperfect, and her squiggles are just as priceless to me as any other squiggle hanging in a museum. Please show her, help her, guide her, encourage her, teach her all you can, so that she will improve every day and learn to do it on her own because you let her try. So that always has an impact with my staff, to let them know that, it's okay to push, it's okay to set goals and high expectations, and what we're really looking for. Again, it's not mastery, it's independence. And I always tell my staff that everyone working with her, the goal is to get her to be the most productive, independent, and successful adult that she can be. And we start that at the youngest age possible. And everybody who works with a child, those should be the same goals. That the portion of that their lifespan you're working on with them is for that eventual goal of independence, success, and happiness. So to do that, we have to let them try. And there are times where a parent gets stuck in a rut and has been dealing with the same thing over and over again. And there are times parents stop presuming competence on their own child. And that's when we look to you as professionals to step in. And, despite as involved as I am, this has happened to me once when I was, again, my daughter was in school, and she had the most amazing instructional aide ever who's worked with her. And she helped my daughter leaps and bounds, and it was just wonderful in every capacity possible. And she said to me one day, it's time, you need to send her to school in underwear. And the look on my face, because potty training has been something I had worked on for 3 years. It wasn't working. It was frustrating, to the point where we were just exhausted. And as a family, we had stopped presuming competence and kind of had in our head that this was just never going to work out, and our child was always going to be in pull-ups, and we were just kind of resigned to that fact. But my wonderful instructional assistant said, she can do it. Put her in underwear tomorrow. She can do it. And I thought she was crazy. I thought, the mess she's going to make and the interruptions to the class, and what are the other kids going to say? And she kept saying to me, Mandy, she can do it. Let her try. And I put her in underwear and I sent so many extra clothes that day because I was sure it wasn't going to work, but it did. She did not have one accident, and it kept going. And this, because of her presuming competence and getting me stuck out of that rut I had been in, she was helping me move forward. So always think about that if a parent says it's not going to happen, I can't do it, I'm not ready to try, you be the one to encourage others to see the potential in the child, and never underestimate the power of influence that you can have on a family, or even other professionals, to help be the one to encourage them to go past and presume more competence and show more opportunities that the child may have. Another point parents wanted you to know was these are some things that you could do to help win us over. Establish a personal connection with us. Your business, it's your job, but it's our most precious possession. So let me know that this just isn't business to you. Let me know that you see my child, an individual. Let me know that maybe you have a disabled family member yourself, so you really get all the things that we're dealing with and understand it and invest in us. Also understand and respect that we have parental rights. We have the right to be informed, make decisions. And when you're speaking about legal regulations or company policies, many parents aren't aware of what they are. So as a professional, make sure you know what they are and you can accurately explain it to us. Because there has been more than one occasion where I have had a professional misrepresent or mislead things, and that does nothing but damage a relationship when you think you are intentionally misled or kept in the dark about something. Do what's right instead of what's easy. And sometimes that might mean being the lone person on the team to stand up and say something. And definitely be positive. Negativity runs off. So, don't pass the buck when you're talking to the families about things happened and it was this one's fault or that one's fault, or badmouth other people who are on the team. Always try to be positive and let the parents know that you're there and you're going to help them through whatever situation occurs. We also want you to know that we rely on you more than you know. We rely on you to connect us with resources. You have experience in whatever field you're in, and you know what other families have looked into. And not all families are connected with community resources or state or federal resources that are available. So help us to connect with the resources, see what we're already involved in and where you can help fill the gap, or even just supply us with information so that we can make decisions on what we'd like to have our child participate in. Stay informed on current trends that are coming up. If there's any changes to, policies or healthcare or anything that would impact services, please stay on top of that so that you can also be the one to pass on that information to us. Advocate for us and with us. Be there and be present. Help prepare us for the future. And this is a big one. Many parents are really overwhelmed and exhausted just dealing with day-to-day business. And to think 5 or 10 years down the road is sometimes just really emotional for us. What's going to happen to my child at that point? And a lot of these things, though, they do need to be prepared for. You need to start thinking about, living arrangements, employment goals, post-secondary school options, funding sources, things like that, getting connected with different services once they graduate high school, or if they're going to need, a home health aide or a behavioral service intervention. So help prepare us for that. Even if we're not open to talking about it, just keep us posted on what timelines are and when we really need to get focused on it, and help us get connected with these agencies so that we aren't left with gaps in services or plans that aren't coming through, and then our child is really going to be left out. We rely on you to always act in the best interest of the child, and we look to you to lead us. You're the professional and you've dealt with things like this before, so lead us on where we should be looking and what we should be involved in. We rely on you to keep our children safe, loved, and happy while they're in your care. The next is some ideas on why parents would consider leaving you as a provider. And number one is because trust has been broken. And this is especially true if you have a child who can't communicate easily and appropriately with what happened during their day. It's very hard for a parent to give up control when the child is not in my care, and I have to be able to trust that you are always acting in the best interest of my child and treating them with love, care, and respect, and doing what we agreed the plan to be. Having communication issues, and again, that can be hard because everyone has different schedules, but as Roseanne mentioned earlier, really establish what the communication process should look like on how you're going to get messages to and from, and what you should expect. So communication is really key to a relationship. Finding out that your privacy has been violated, especially, you don't want to be in the supermarket and find out that one teacher told a neighbor something about your child, and you're just left there with, those terrible feelings that you can't trust people, and things that should be remained in confidence and now being shared with others. Being unwilling to collaborate with other team members is something that could be an issue. Not following through on what plans were, or not being proactive enough to make new plans. Taking shortcuts on things, presuming incompetence would be a reason. A lack of understanding of the child, the family, the situations that are occurring, using offensive terms to describe the child or the disability, or falling into a pattern of having low expectations, or again, just painting all parents with the same brush and assuming that every consumer and every family that you're working with is the same. Another thing that parents want you to know is that your job revolves around our most precious possession. So you need to understand that sometimes emotions and reactions will occur on the parent side, and we can take things very personally. And sometimes you may bear the brunt of our unfiltered reactions when something happens, because our natural protective instincts come out when it comes to our children. And try to understand where it's coming from. It's your job, but it's our child. And put yourself in that position, that when you're hearing about these things, where these emotions and the reactions might be coming from. Parents aren't ever off the clock. We don't work 9 to 5 or work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And some parents don't even get sleep because their kids have behaviors overnight, or they have no nursing coverage that comes. So they're putting in extra hours, and they're not getting vacations from this, and they're not getting respite and mental health breaks. So it really does get to be exhausting sometimes for the parent, and how they interact with others is definitely a result of that. Families also just don't have the access to anything in the community whenever they want. Sometimes there are behaviors or safety concerns, so families aren't getting out and getting to experience breaks from their reality at times because of the needs and the supports that their child needs. So it's overwhelming, and it can be exhausting. Sometimes our past experiences we've had with other agencies or professionals has us a little skeptical about working with somebody new. Somewhere along the line, somebody did my child wrong, and I will be ever vigilant of moving forward that doesn't happen again. So prove us wrong, show us you're different than the others, and then help us to put our guard down so that we can move forward and have a good relationship with you. Understand that assertive parents are not crazy parents. I hear this used a lot. An informed and an involved parent is a good thing. There's somebody who's there who wants to make sure things are happening for their child the way it should. So they shouldn't be looked at as hard to deal with or demanding. Actually, they're just doing their parental duties of being involved and doing what's best for their child's needs. And treat us as valued members of the team. Include us in decision making. Listen to our concerns or suggestions. Discuss things with us instead of informing us of things. The next thing that parents want you to know is don't give up on us. We make mistakes too. Help us to move past conflicts that we have. Don't hold a grudge. Be forgiving. We have a common goal of doing what's best for the child. We might need you to remind us and follow up with us on things. We have a lot on our plates and we drop the ball. So if we're not signing papers in the appropriate amount of time, or handing something in, we, remind us, follow up with us, help us to make sure we're getting everything done. And just check in with us, because maybe it's something that we don't understand and we're too embarrassed to ask for help with. Have patience with us. It might be a new situation to a parent, or it could just be something they're exhausted by at this point. We may ask you to go through all available options and trials before we are willing to accept something that we think is less than what our child needs. So don't give up on us. And the last thing parents want you to know is that we appreciate you. I once heard a parent say that the best thing about her child's team was that she just gets to be just mom, and not the teacher, not the behavior therapist, not the doctor, not the researcher, just mom. And that's something a lot of people take for granted. The fact that her team was so effective in all their various roles that she did not have to compensate in any area. So we really want you to know that we know you work with some of the most challenging populations. We know it can be mentally and physically overwhelming and exhausting at times for you. We know everything that goes wrong isn't your fault. We know you hear complaints much more than you hear compliments. We know you aren't compensated nearly as much as you should be. You are valued much more than your paycheck reflects. We appreciate all of the extras you do and notice it. And today, Roseanne and I really appreciate your willingness to be part of this professional development and help grow better relationships between you and your consumers. And in reality, just to do everything we can to make sure all the children are getting what they need. So thank you very much. And this is our contact information. Should you have any questions for us that you want to follow up with, Roseanne and I do presentations for parents. We do co-hosting with other agencies to bring some more parent and professional development. And we are able to do this presentation for agencies and trainings privately also. So you can feel free to message us at any time. We'll stop the recording now and see if anyone has any questions or comments that they would like to do. You can either put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself to ask directly. Let's see.